Guys, like, comment, subscribe, share this video, especially if you love college football as much as I do. Now, this is not a trash talking video. This is just me giving my honest opinion about Florida State versus LSU. That's probably the biggest game in September of this upcoming football season. My concerns with LSU are in things that can be fixed, but I don't think it'll be a whole heck of a lot better by week one. First off, your pass defense for LSU was not very good. Almost anybody was able to throw the football on y'all. Run defense was pretty solid. Y'all are a physical team. Offensively, your offensive line was horrible. Pass blocking was horrible. 42 sacks. And to be honest, Jaden Daniels bailed y'all out a lot of times. He should have been sacked, but he was able to spin away or run up that small crease and outrun defenders and pick up first down yardage. He did that a lot with Florida State last year. By the way, who pushed around LSU on the line of scrimmage. Now LSU's defensive front wasn't a joke, obviously. Florida State was able to hold them off pretty well, though, and pretty much go up and down the field for the most part against LSU. If I'm being completely honest. I'm not being funny. I'm not talking trash about LSU. No disrespect to LSU. But here's the sad part. And people talk about, well, LSU's going to get better. Well, Florida State is too. And really, to be honest, LSU's not making a big difference on the offensive line. You're getting 2 new offensive linemen. You're basically bringing back half of your offensive line. About 3 out of 5 is about half, or a little bit more. It's hard for me to say that LSU's offensive line is going to be a lot better by week one on the road in Orlando. It's basically Florida State's house. It's in the state of Florida. Here's the thing. Think about LSU. They could not block Florida State's undersized defensive front. Think about it. Florida State's defensive front got pushed around by Wake Forest. They got beat up front by Clemson. Now, I understand Florida State had injuries, but it still happened. I mean, that's it's what it is. Florida had a chance to beat Florida State because Florida's offensive line blocked Florida State pretty well. Oklahoma, who was missing offensive linemen in that game, blocked Florida State pretty well. That's why those teams either beat or had a chance to beat Florida State. And y'all were not one of those teams. Florida State had a bad offensive line for a good while. In 2016, this reminds me of 2016 LSU. Very loaded with talent. Great running backs. Great defensive players. But you know what hurt Florida State in 2016? You couldn't block for your quarterback. You couldn't block anybody. That's what hurt y'all. Now, I understand you got new players, so it's possible it'll be a lot better. But remember, Florida State's offensive line really didn't show big improvements until 2021 when they went 5-7. They went 0-4. You remember who they played in the first game? Notre Dame. On top of that, they had a young defensive line playing Florida State's offensive line. They pushed Florida State around in that game. And that's supposedly when Florida State had new offensive linemen coming from the transfer portal and they brought guys back. Now, I understand it's a different school. LSU has more talent than Florida State ever has lately. But the problem is that's just not a thing I can see being fixed in week one. And here's the thing. Florida State brought in a whole lot more good players from the transfer portal. Most notably, guess what? The defensive side of the ball, because that needs to be fixed for Florida State. I expect Florida, and they brought in 2 300-pound guys on the defensive line that will probably start. So my question is, if you could not hold off a much less talented Florida State team, in terms of LSU's talent, the talent difference was about this much, and that's why I was picking LSU to win that game for a while. Now they got more talent. You have about the same amount of talent. It's about like this, maybe this much difference. What makes me think you're going to go to not Tallahassee, but Orlando in Florida and beat Florida State when they're probably evenly as matched as you now? And your offensive line was a big problem last year. I don't expect LSU's problems to be fixed like that in week one. It just doesn't work that way. Now, throughout the year, I expect LSU to block better. And I had a fan brag about how they blocked Will Anderson and that defense for Alabama. Alabama was an underachieving team last year, who I think will beat y'all this year. So that's my opinion. If you can't win the line of scrimmage, and your pass defense struggles, how do you expect to beat teams like Florida State? No.